Well, Shigeru Ishiba is a bit of a maverick, representing a regional area of Japan, the part of Japan that really many tourists wouldn't go to, that's suffering from population decline. But he's really emerged on the national platform here as a bit of a maverick, because he's quite open to speak his mind. He gives plenty of media interviews and he's quite open at speaking his mind, even if that puts him against the party. In fact, once he even left the party to join a splinter group before coming back to the party. So that's always done well amongst voters, that politician who speaks their mind, but it doesn't always do well in the party. And he's wanted this job for a very long time. He's been defence minister, he's a veteran politician, but he's always missed out on becoming the prime minister, largely because he's annoyed so many of his fellow politicians for speaking against the party, as I mentioned. He's a bit more of a moderate compared to some of the conservatives of the party. One of the issues that has been really dominating from a social policy platform is whether men and women in Japan should be able to have different surnames after marriage. Right now you can't. You have to have the same surname. He said he would support a change in that regards. Economics, he wants more attention on the regions, these parts of Japan that are often forgotten. And really, in many ways, he would be seen as a safe pair of hands, a continuation of the current government led by Prime Minister Fumio Kishida.
And so who did he beat to secure the top job?
Yeah, well, who he beat was quite an interesting case. Her name is Sanae Takaichi. Now, if she won, Takaichi would have been Japan's first female prime minister. This is a country where men still absolutely dominate all the senior positions of politics and business. So it might have seemed quite revolutionary to have her in this position. But on the flip side, she's also incredibly conservative. She regards Margaret Thatcher as a role model. On that marriage question I just mentioned, she's firmly against men and women having different surnames. Some people will say she's just too far right for the general voting population here on things like same-sex marriage as well, another area where it's not allowed in Japan. Economics, she is really the protege of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and so she wanted to continue his platform of stimulus packages and keeping interest rates ultra low to kind of give the economy a bit of a kick. And the other interesting person was Shigeru Koizumi. He would have been Japan's youngest Prime Minister. He's been compared to Justin Trudeau, but ultimately his lack of experience cost him the job. He was a clear front runner, but just slipped in the polling as the weeks went off. Just too many gaffes and too many people just making fun of his inexperience. So that ultimately meant that he wasn't a serious contender when it finally came to the day that mattered, which is today.
And so why is Japan changing prime ministers even when an election hasn't even been called?
Well, so Fumio Kishida has been the Prime Minister, and there's been a whole series of scandals under his watch, and most of these scandals haven't actually directly linked with him. One of the most damaging, for instance, was a scandal that exposed senior politicians who were misusing donated funds, and he wasn't directly linked to that. He wasn't inappropriately using these donations, but many people just thought he was too much of a weak leader, not correcting the direction of the party. So he decided after many bad polls against his leadership, he would step down and not recontest for the leadership. Today's meeting was scheduled. It might have been a rubber stamp process, but Fumio Kishida said he won't recontest. That's what started today's election. And Ishiba, who will take over now, he's vowed to clean up the party image. And given that he's a bit of an outsider from some of these other factions, that'll probably do quite well. We are expecting Japan to go to the polls. They don't have to go to the polls until next year, but the new leader will probably want to go to the polls sooner or later. The opposition here is still in a bit of a shambolic state. They always struggle to kind of put up a clean, united front. So despite all the scandals affecting the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, it is expected that they should win the next election. Joe?
And no suggestion there'd be any change on the international policy front, although if he's being described as a bit of a maverick, maybe he's a bit of an unknown quantity?
No, well, Maverick is more my reference to how he looks at the party and how he's spoken about domestic issues and speaking freely to the media. People often do love politicians who speak their mind. In terms of international, no, he will be seen as more of a status quo politician. One of the areas is that Japan and South Korea have really been coming together in recent years, and this is a push from the United States as well, given there is a common concern here about China and North Korea. Japan and South Korea haven't often gotten along due to the history between the two countries and Japan's wartime history and colonial rule of South Korea. The bigger concern would have been Takaichi, you know, the other contender who would have been the first female prime minister. She is a hardline nationalist. She would have visited the shrine that is in the Yasukuni Shrine, which is where which pays homage to Japan's war dead, including convicted war criminals. Now, attending that shrine really infuriates China and South Korea. So if she was Prime Minister and she went through with that, that would have really done some damage to the South Korean relationship, which is on a good footing, finally, after so many years being in the doldrums.